Buenos dias. Soy Linda Gabbard, and this is all my Spanish. So I am very pleased to be with you today. I've had a dream to come to Argentina for many years and be here in your beautiful city. So thank you very much for inviting me and welcoming me here today. And we are living in uncertain times. Political change, economic change, globalizations, forces of technology, generational changes. All of this going on at once. And sometimes it's very difficult as leaders to see a good path forward. So at least for myself, it's helpful to remember that throughout history there have been many eras of changing and dynamic times like these. And I like to look at a lesson of a leader or leaders who have been able to navigate those times so that their people not only survive, but thrive and prosper. So I want you to imagine a time, this was back in 1994 and 1995, in South Africa. Nelson Mandela and the African Congress have just taken political leadership in the first democratic election in South Africa. And Nelson Mandela partners with Francois Pienaar, the captain of the South African Springboks. I can see some nods here, so I know you know this story. The Springboks were beloved by the Afrikaners and sort of despised by the black South Africans as a symbol of apartheid. And Mandela and Pienaar together had the vision to bring the country together around this team as a way to unite them. They were not favored to win. And we're just going to start today with a moment of inspiration of the captain, Francois Pienaar, inspiring his team close to the end of the final match between the Springboks and the heavily favored New Zealand rugby team. And we'll just start the video now, please.
Too many guys off their feet. At the rucks. Speak to your team. Heads up! Look in my eyes. Do you hear? Listen to your country. 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Defense, defense, defense. This is it. This is our destiny. Come on, come on. Come on. No!
Good. I love sports, and I love winning. And so to see an inspirational leader like that in a moment of, at a real inflection point for the team, for myself, makes me remember the power of what leadership looks like. So we'll be coming back through this throughout the course today, throughout the talk today, to this powerful movie. So first of all, though, let's kind of think about what the environment was like then. It was volatile, right? Lots of ups and downs, no stability, rates of change that were uncertain in their speed and duration, creating a condition of instability. There was uncertainty. Even the current situation was not clear, and certainly the future outcomes were not clear. There was complexity. So lots of interconnected variables and dependencies, again, making the future difficult to predict. And there was ambiguity. So different agendas for different people, different truths for different people, and lots of unknown unknowns, which are the characteristics of ambiguity. We've got an acronym for this that we use in the United States that comes from the military called VUCA. I think here it would be VICA. Are you familiar with the term. This is what happens when all of these conditions are present at one time, right? All of them together. And that combination creates quite a lot of complexity, and it either can come along with or cause disruption. And what most experts say now is that, from now in our world, with the pace of change as fast as it is, we are living in a VUCA environment, and we can expect this to continue and even accelerate into the future. And what this means for us is that the roads that we travel as leaders are winding and dangerous, and sometimes it's very difficult to see around the next curve to know what's ahead. And of course, this impacts all of us as leaders. It impacts us. It impacts all the people in our companies and people that we are working with and leading. Lots of times, there is no more status quo. Right? If you try to hold a course that's steady just hold the course and not change, the environment is will get away from you. So just status quo is impossible. Many of the old traditional tools for planning and execution that have served us very well in the past no longer serve today and will not serve into the future. And this can create a sense of overwhelm, out of controlness, stress and anxiety. For me, I think about it as the 4 o'clock a.m. club. I don't know how many of you have ever joined me in that club. I'm there a lot, at 4 in the morning, wide awake, kind of trying to think and navigate my way through whatever challenge is in front of me. So something I would invite you to do today is to think about your own world, your own situation. Maybe there's an area or many areas where the environment feels like VUCA. And so just have one of those in mind as we go through. As you hear some of the tools or learnings, how would you apply that to your own particular situation? Okay. So I saw something recently in an article from the Harvard Business Review about the kind of leadership that's required in a VUCA world. And it also has the VUCA acronym. So we start with vision, right? The ability of the leader to define and paint the picture of the desired future outcome and state. This is vision. We think about understanding, right? Being able to understand what's actually happening today. Who are the stakeholders? What are the complexities and interdependencies? How are these relationships going to carry us into the future? Right? And there's an element of empathy here, understanding what's important for all of the stakeholders and how that can apply for them. This is the attribute of understanding. Courage. It takes courage to lead in a VUCA world. Courage to, first of all, hold true to the strategic course and values in the face of lots of outside turbulence, and also the courage to risk and make the kind of bold moves that will take you and your organization into the future. Adaptability, right? Sometimes we say in coaching, the ability to dance in the moment. Being able to flex and move as time changes, and closely related to this is agility, the ability to quickly and nimbly change course as times demand. These are the 4 VUCA leadership attributes, and I would add to this a final one, a T for teaching. In my mind, in the VUCA world, no leader by themselves has all of the intellect and all of the power and all of the know-how to navigate such a challenging road. They need to teach these leadership attributes throughout the entire organization so they have the benefit of the whole team together with that. Right? So what I want to do today is take a look at each one of these and how they might play out. And we'll start with vision. So in this sense, vision incorporates three of the most influential roles of the leader. So first of all, the visionary. The ability to see forward into the future and create that picture of what the organization can become, to understand the mission of the organization and its why, as we say in America, or I learned from the chairs this week that here we talk about the what for, right? The purpose of the organization and the values and behaviors that the organization is going to be true to along the path. This is the role of the visionary. Oops. True north, right? This is the visionary role. The second role is the communicator, evangelist or preacher. So the evangelist preaches the vision. They communicate throughout the organization and externally with all of the stakeholders what the vision is. The evangelist also has a role of enforcer, a sergeant we might call it, right? So the visionary creates the box that we're going to play in. The preacher makes sure, or evangelist makes sure everybody knows what that box looks like, and also that the organization stays inside of it. Right? We have many examples of leaders who are great visionaries and great communicators, and they sort of forget about that enforcer role. So examples, some of the crises that we had in 2008, 2009, the Enron debacle are, in my mind, examples where the leader was strong and visionary and great communicator, but forgot that enforcer role. The third role is the strategist. So what is our path? How we know where we want to go. We're very clear about this in the communications, but how are we actually going to get there? That's the role of the strategist. And in my mind, all three of these are incorporated in the VUCA imperative of vision. So let's watch, in just a minute, we'll watch Nelson Mandela with his head of security. And in this clip, he exhibits all of these. He has a vision of a rainbow nation where all South Africans have equal opportunity, right, regardless of their background or their color. This is his vision. He has a strategy of how he wants to get there, and that's through reconciliation and forgiveness. It's a bold strategy, bold and unique and uncomfortable for many people. So watch him here as he engages with his head of security, and notice how each of these three roles come forward. And we can start. Thank you.
You look agitated, Jason.
Well, that's because there are 4 special branch cops in my office.
Oh, what did you do?
Nothing. But they say they're the presidential bodyguards and they have orders signed by you.
Ah, yes, ah, yes. Well, these men are special trained by SAS. They have lots of experience. They protected the clerk.
Yes, sir, but it doesn't mean that they have to come...
You asked for more men, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I asked...
When people see me in public, they see my bodyguards. You represent me directly. The Rainbow Nation starts here. Reconciliation starts here.
Reconciliation, sir.
Yes, reconciliation, Jason.
Comrade President, not long ago, these guys tried to kill us. Maybe even these 4 guys in my office tried and often succeeded.
Yes, I know. Forgiveness starts here, too. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That is why it is such a powerful weapon.
Yes. Did you hear it? Right? Strategy, vision, communicating, enforcing, all in that little conversation, and teaching, right, the fifth VUCA attribute. So I want to give you just a couple of tools that can sometimes be helpful in creating vision in a VUCA world. And so one of these is really staying focused on creative versus reactive visioning and problem solving. So a reactive problem solving focuses on the problem. Mandela could have focused on the problem, right? These two factions in the security team aren't getting along, right? He could have directed his energy to that particular problem, and maybe he would have separated them. Who knows what he would have come out. But he chose not to do that. He kept his focus on the vision, the outcome he wants to create. The security team reflects me, right? Nelson Mandela, it needs to reflect my vision for the country, and that is what I want to create, and that's the focus. So sometimes what we find, and research shows, that in a reactive or problem-focused strategy, what we'll see is an ebb and flow of performance, but not sustained growth over time. So you could think of an example of that. Say a competitor comes into a market, one of your competitors comes into a market, and they make some kind of a price movement, right? They're encroaching in your space or into your customers with some kind of a competitive move. And you, as your company, focuses on that, reacts to that, right? Maybe you adjust your prices too. In time you win, right? Performance goes up, in time you win, the competitive threat ebbs, your attention goes off the matter, and performance goes back down, right? This is an example of the reactive problem solving. In a creative approach, competitor comes in, you keep your focus on what you want to create. Maybe your goal is to be the leader in this particular industry in a certain way, or to make sure that you're serving the customers in a way that they're referring you to other clients, for example. You keep your focus there, right, and your decision-making focused on that goal, and what happens over time then is a sustained growth in performance. So something I would invite you to think about in your own VUCA situation, where are the places that you might be focused on problems? And what could shift if you turned your attention right to the outcome and kept the focus on the outcome that you want to create? Just something to think about. There's another tool I want to show you, and this one is around strategy. This is called design thinking. My exposure comes from the work of a Dr. Lika at the University of Virginia. I think there's several other strategy experts who use this same kind of model. But I believe it's especially valuable in the VUCA world because it starts with the first question of the analysis of what is. This is going back a little bit to our leadership attribute of understanding. What is today? And then the second question, which I love, is what if? Right? This is possibility focused. So if we removed all the constraints, if we took away the concepts of what we can't do, and just focused on what if, what might be available to us, and this will open up a large number of alternatives, more than what might be available if we narrowed our thinking right around the constraints that were there. So that's the second step. The third focuses on what wows. So out of our array of possibilities, what are the ones that would actually really create value, right, that would be very important to the organization. And then we come and narrow even further from that. Now, put the constraints back around us, because of course they're there. What works? So what is, what if, what wows, and what works. And I want to give a brief example this is Vistage member Lisa Gordon in Atlanta. She's actually a member of the Vistage group that I chair. And she's the CEO of Habitat for Humanity in Atlanta. They're a nonprofit, and in Atlanta, a very major and historic nonprofit. They focus on providing home ownership for low-income people, or helping low-income people achieve home ownership via getting donations for home materials and volunteers to build. So they can build a house for a very small amount of money, and then the homeowner is able to buy with an interest-free loan. And they also work on the building of the house, so they have some financial equity, but also some sweat equity into the home themselves. And Lisa took over this organization about 18 months ago. At the time, they had built themselves up slowly to where they were doing 50, 60 homes a year in Atlanta, which is great, right? Helping 50, 60 families achieve home ownership is a proud accomplishment. However, 5,000 people were applying for homes, and there's 50,000 families in Atlanta who would actually qualify and benefit from some of the services that they can provide. So Lisa used some of the design thinking strategies to think, how do I go from 50 to 5,000 to 50,000, right? An area of scale. And she has been able to focus the organization on that, which has not been easy. I can promise you that. By keeping them focused on that outcome, right, that outcome that they want to create. We're doing 50, but we need 50,000, and if we can do 50,000, we can really make a dent in providing affordable housing to people who need it in Atlanta. She has put together a 5-year plan. Her fundraising is tripled over what was happening before she came. And she also used the design thinking to create some programs that helped in small ways. So for example, Habitat would build a home in a neighborhood, but all around the home was blight, right? So here would be this nice new home, but it's surrounded by homes that are falling apart. So they created something called Brush with Kindness, which meant when they built on a street, they would go in and renovate or paint or work with all the homeowners on that street who wanted repair to upgrade the entire street, right? So these were some small ways to make steps using the design thinking while the bigger plan is being put in place. And I also wanted to mention my member. This is another member, David Gracie. We'll see him frequently today. He's a 10-year plus member of my Vistage group. And he's got a small IT services company. He's got a goal. Actually, he started this 2 years ago to have a goal to triple in size by 2020. He's already grown to the point where now it's double in size by 2020. He's used the principles of he's taken that vision. He has a firm set of values, and for each of the values, he has created a set of behaviors. So they have 26 behaviors. Sounds like a lot. He calls these the fundamentals, reflective of Network One's fundamentals. Every week, there's a behavior of the week. There's a fundamental of the week. So when they have meetings, internal communications, new people are onboarding, they're focusing on that fundamental, and they just cycle those through a couple times every year. Each behavior comes up. So this is the way that he keeps his organization focused on the vision and the values that are important to him. His growth rate now is over 30%. Okay. So next we're going to move to the leadership imperative of understanding. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit. As I said earlier, understanding is all about what is. There's a Vistage speaker, James Newton, who speaks very often about having a healthy relationship with what is. So I don't know about you, but I find for myself that sometimes there's parts of what is that I wish weren't part of what is, and it's very easy to turn a blind eye on that, or maybe not notice that. Is one of the advantages. I think those of you who are Vistage members know one of the things that you get as a benefit of a Vistage membership is that many of those kind of blind spots come uncovered. But these are the things that are important. Frequently, things like a SWOT analysis is a great way for our internal understanding of the company, as well as what might be going on outside. And various biases can come into play around understanding. I'll come back to that in just a minute. But having a number of different perspectives can help complete the understanding that we have. And empathy is an important piece of this as well, right? Being able to understand what's going on with the other person and relate to how whatever is happening might be impacting them as well. So let's have a look at Nelson Mandela on his first day of work in his new office and watch how he demonstrates this leadership imperative of understanding. If we can start.
How are you this morning? Fine. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Some of you may know who I am. I could not help noticing the empty offices as I came to work this morning, and all of the packing boxes. Now, of course, if you want to leave, that is your right. And if you feel in your heart that you cannot work with your new government, then it is better that you do leave right away. But if you are packing up because you fear that your language or the color of your skin or who you worked for before disqualifies you from working here, I am here to tell you, have no such fear. What is verbay is verbay. The past is the past. We look to the future now. We need your help. We want your help. If you would like to stay, you would be doing your country a great service. All I ask is that you do your work to the best of your abilities and with good heart. I promise to do the same.
Promoting his vision, right? He doesn't want the government to completely turn over, the administration to completely turn over from one side to the other. He needs the people that have been there. And yet he shows great understanding and empathy for what might be going on with them as a way to engage and engage with them in a way to make them know that they are truly welcome, right, in the government itself. So some components of understanding are around the way that we make decisions. And in Vistage, we talk about optimized decision making. So let me explain a little bit what that means. In most decisions, right, we have a component of importance or value of a decision, right? How much is at stake or how much the decision is worth, right? And then there's also a component of complexity. how many variables or contingencies can be there. So when the importance is low, right, what's at stake is low and the complexity is low, lots of times we can make these decisions just using our instincts. One thing I've learned in Vistage over the years is that the business owners that I work with have great instincts about their business. Lots of times they have a stronger sense of the business through just their past experience and their gut than they may through any kind of detailed analysis. And yet, as the decision becomes more complicated and more valuable, it's usually a good idea to bring in some sort of a decision-making analysis. And of course, there are dozens of these. But something besides just my own gut feeling to help me actually intellectually think through pros and cons of various alternatives, right? And then finally, as it becomes very complex or very important, we might want to bring in additional perspectives, like the Vistage members would have in their Vistage advisory board. And the interesting thing about this dynamic is that as leaders use all three of the methods, their instincts, right, their judgment or analysis, and the various perspectives, their instincts get better, right? Their decision-making strength and accuracy tends to improve over time. So something to think about as you go through your decisions in your VUCA environment is, where am I just relying on my gut? Where might it help me to either do some formal analysis of the decision, or even more important, to bring in outside perspectives, right? We all have bias, several kinds of bias, and two I think that come into play particularly in the VUCA world is the idea of sort of confirmation bias. So I hear what I want to hear, and I filter out everything that I don't want to filter out. This is confirmation bias. And then there's experience bias, right? What's happened before will happen again. And those two kind of biases in the VUCA world can be very dangerous. So bringing in judgment and especially various perspectives is a great way to have other people and methods help you challenge some of the biases that are there. In addition to that, and I know this is something everyone is familiar with, right? The law of unintended consequences, or the law of cascading consequences. But in the VUCA world, right, we have the focus of intention. So we make an action with the intent for something to happen beyond that. In the VUCA world, the unintended scope of impact can be much bigger than it has been in the past. And so being careful, right, around what that unintended scope of impact might be is very important. And this is another decision model or framework that's come from Vistage that can help be a tool to really think through what some of those unintended consequences might be. So you can see in the center of the circle, we have some of the leadership components of vision and strategy, culture, and alignment. And on the outside, we have our functional environment of our clients, right? The external world of clients, talent, finding and keeping good talent, our financials, and operations, which would also include our vendors and supply chain. So just using a framework like this to help think through where some of the impact might be on each decision can be very helpful and a tool to make sure your understanding of reality is as healthy, right, is as healthy and as true as it can be. So a real life example of this comes from another Vistage member, Southeast Wood Floors. In this case, the founder of the company had built the company to really be a leader, kind of the gorilla in this particular industry in the Southeast. And one of their suppliers, a very key and important supplier with a large market share nationally, was deciding to go direct in sales instead of through distributors. And that supplier was not willing yet to take on this company, but so what they were doing was buying up similar companies, you know, all around the area. So basically, Southeast Wood Floors was becoming surrounded, right, by this large competitor going direct. So the owner brought this question to the Vistage group and sourced a number of different alternatives, including the possibility of maybe now's the time to sell, right, was one of the possibilities. But he decided that he wanted to continue to compete, and he felt there was more growth and value to be had. But he had to change, right? He had to drop the supplier that was now a competitor and add another supplier, and he chose upstart, right, young, fast-growing new supplier in that field who would be very interested in having a strong partner as an alignment. And very interestingly, he went through a very detailed analysis of this, including pro formas of both worst case scenario, expected scenario, and best case scenario, and brought the implementation plan to the Vistage group and let them kind of poke holes in what his plans were, and was able to get some adjustments on that. Did successfully make the change, had a flat year as a result, but had actually expected as a best case scenario to drop off a little bit. So he actually exceeded his best case scenario, right, through the use of the proper planning. Okay, we're going to move on from understanding to courage. So courage is the idea of taking bold action in the face of uncertainty, right? It has a lot to do with risk. And it also goes back to the enforcer role that we talked about earlier, being able to really hold true to the values and vision that's important even when hard winds are buffeting you all around. So in the clip that we're going to watch from Invictus, Nelson Mandela learns that the Congress, in one of the first acts, the new Congress, in one of the first acts that they made, has voted unanimously to disenfranchise the Springbok rugby team. So they are to be no more. Their colors are gone. Everything about them is gone. And he believes that this is wrong and counter to the vision that he's trying to create. And so you're going to see him go to the Capitol, right, and talk to the Congress. His advisors, his closest advisors, beg him not to. There's one line before we see where the advisor says, "Why would you risk all of your political capital on a rugby team of all things?" But that team was critical to his vision of how to unite the country, and so he prevails. Let's watch him here. You can start.
Sisters, comrades, I am here because I believe you have made a decision with insufficient information and foresight. I am aware of your earlier vote. I am aware that it was unanimous. Nonetheless, I believe we should restore the Springboks. Restore their name, their emblem, and their colors immediately. Let me tell you why. On Robben Island, in Pollsmoor prison, all of my jailers were Afrikaners. For 27 years, I studied them. I learned their language, read their books, their poetry. I had to know my enemy before I could prevail against them. And we did prevail, did we not? All of us here, we prevailed. Our enemy is no longer the Afrikaner. They are our fellow South Africans, our partners in democracy. And they treasure Springbok rugby. If we take that away, we lose them. We prove that we are what they feared we would be. We have to be better than that. We have to surprise them with the compassion, with restraint and generosity. I know all of the things they denied us. But this is no time to celebrate petty revenge. This is the time to build our nation, using every single brick available to us, even if that brick comes wrapped in green and gold. You elected me your leader. Let me lead you now.
This was a powerful stand that he took. And notice how he risked his political capital there. He ended up winning by 9 votes. It's a small margin, but he won. And I noticed also how the fifth dimension of teaching was very important there, right, as he held his strategy, right? So we all have fear, right? I know I have fear. I would suggest everybody has fear. And lots of times fear gets formed by some kind of experience or results that then form a belief, right? Form a belief pattern. And when you think about some of the dynamic that was present in South Africa and is present in lots of places today, in business and outside of business, fear gets bred by experience, right? So the experience creates a belief, right? So the belief could be the Afrikaners can't be trusted, right? This belief would be based and would have been valid in the time that it was formed. And that belief is then going to drive actions and behavior that are going to drive results, right, that are then going to reinforce the belief. So many times when it's important to make a bold move or break a pattern in the face of fear, if you can focus on changing the underlying belief, right, that's where true change can be created. And that's what Nelson Mandela did in that clip. He said, they were once our enemy, but now they're not our enemy. They're our fellow countrymen. Right? So a new belief, right, from a new belief can spring new actions that are going to lead to different results and then reinforce the new belief. So this dynamic is true in a global, right, global situations, global basis, but it's also true in it's true in small internal ways too. So something that I would invite you to think about in your situation, your VUCA situation, is where is there a belief, right? A belief that got formed in a different environment. There was a different map, and now that the terrain has changed, maybe that belief isn't serving you so well anymore. That could be you on a personal basis or you on in a leadership basis in your company. What new belief could you create to create a different power of behavior? That's the question. Here again are some examples. My friend David Gracie. When David first became a Vistage member, his company was tiny. It barely even qualified for Vistage. And he had grown it. He had founded it. That was a bold move, actually. Quit his day job as a network engineer and started a company. Originally, he sold to friends and family, right? People that he knew from his personal network, family members. These were the kind of people that hired him and built his clientele. But as will happen when a company grows, that's eventually going to run out, right? And he had to take the company, he had to find another way to get more growth with people he didn't already know. And David had this hard-held belief that had been founded back in his prior experience that salespeople were evil and not to be trusted. This was his belief, and over, he would come to the Vistage group about how do I get my growth to go back up, and the group would say, hire a sales leader, and he wouldn't do it. This over and over. And finally, one day, under the questioning of the group, he came forward with this idea. This is what I believe. I can't hire a salesperson because you can never trust a salesperson. And the group really helped him take a step back. In fact, there were members of the group, and I know you've experienced, those of you who are members have experienced this best thing, when somebody says something and someone else says, well, you know, I used to think that too. And this is how I moved myself past it. So he did manage to move himself past, and he not only hired a salesperson, he hired a sales leader for the future. It was by far the highest compensated position in the company, including at that time he himself as the owner of the company. But that sales leader was then able to bring in systems and process and knowledge about how to segment the market and how to really create a customer generating engine, right, that was able to create the possibilities that he's achieving today, actually. This picture is Eric Roundtree, another young leader in his early 40s. He's been a Vistage member for a couple of years. He grew up in his company. It's a printing company. He actually started as a pressman. And over time in that company, he became very valuable, and the owner at that time let him buy a little bit of equity and become a partner. And then later they brought in some private equity funding to help take them to the future. And about that time, it was 2008, and the market collapsed. And the company, managed to stay afloat. The private equity people were great partners of them through that period of time. The previous owner left during that period of time, sold his stake to the PE holders, and so Eric became the CEO. Post-recession, the company started growing again, and now the private equity partners were more of an anchor or a drag. They took out a lot of fees. They were very slow to respond. Eric is actually a pretty good risk analyzer and risk taker, but the partners wouldn't respond, and many times the opportunity, again, in a VUCA world, you have to be quick, and the opportunity would go away before the decision could be reached. So Eric took the decision, again with the support of his Vistage group, to actually arrange financing and buy out the partners and become the 100% owner. He made that move about 18 months ago. And by the way, I should say, and I should have mentioned this, all of these members have given me permission to share their their stories with you, and Eric, has as well. But his growth has taken off hugely since that happened, and more importantly, which is this was unintended consequence in a positive way, is the energy and engagement of his team has gone way up. There's something about having the company owned by the CEO and the leader that's much more attractive and energizing for the team, and he's got a much greater latitude and freedom in how to compensate them and help them actually grow with the company now as a sole owner. So his results from that really bold decision have been really powerful. Okay. So we're going to move to adaptability. Very important in a VUCA world. The ability to change, dance in the moment, be nimble as circumstances as circumstances require, while of course still holding true to the vision and the values that are so important. So in our clip, this clip focuses more on the team captain. And I think it's important to remember in this story that there's two leaders, right? Nelson Mandela, of course, had a big role to play in what happened in the story, but so did Francois Pienaar. And in this clip, he's showing some of his ability to adapt himself and to lead a very reluctant team in his direction. We can start, please.
Guys, listen up. Could I just want a few words, please? Afternoon, men. Good to see you all working so hard. I have a short announcement. As part of the PR build-up to the World Cup, you will be conducting coaching clinics in townships all over the country. I know. You have plenty on your plates already. But this is a request from the top. The very top. Yes. Thank you.
This is complete crap, man. What is this, huh? What are we, some sort of circus act now?
We don't have time for shit like this. They expect us to play our best, to give our bloody all. And they add to our bloody workload. What do you think about this, Chester?
Well, I try not to think, because it interferes with my rugby.
You see? Now there's a rugby player. Talk to them, Cappy.
You've got to make them understand. We just don't have the time for this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk to them.
Why not?
Alex, we've become more than just a rugby team. And we might as well get used to it.
Is this you speaking? Or Mandela?
You know me better than that. You know, times change.
And we need to change as well.
So you may remember what happened if you've seen the movie. The team did go. I was really tempted to show this scene with the kids, I have to tell you, because the team did go all around the country. And this was, in my mind, a stroke of genius, because who can resist children, right? Children are the same all over the world. And the team engaged the children, and the children engaged the team. And it opened their eyes to what conditions were like in some of these townships. But it also drew in the parents. The parents could see the team engaging with the children and teaching them, and drew that in. So the whole idea of one team, one country was fostered through that movement. And if without the leadership of the captain, right, the team may never have engaged in that way. So this is the importance of adaptability. And I imagine some of you are probably familiar with the work of Carol Dweck on mindset. She's a motivational research and an expert on motivation. in the U.S., and she's written a book called Mindset. It's a great and easy read if you don't know it. But what her research showed is that people fall into two camps. Those with what she calls a fixed mindset, and these are people who believe, I am what I've got intellectually. So whatever it is I was born with, that's my hand, right, that I was dealt, and that's what I have to play with. It won't change. So therefore, I better be invulnerable. I better not fail. I better not ever make a mistake, right? Because I don't have any capability to get better. This is fixed mindset. Growth mindset people have the opposite belief. They believe they can learn and grow and adapt into whatever new talent or new skill or new area they want to achieve. So for these people, failure is just, a step on the ladder, the step on the ladder to success. It's completely okay to be a beginner, to try things that you don't know how to do, right? If you fail, try again. This kind of mindset comes from the growth mindset. It's no surprise that growth mindset people in the grown-up world, right, win over fixed mindset people in time. But what was a little bit surprising in the research was that she found was that a lot of people who are born with gifts, born with, say, a great intelligence and a great background, start to get this messaging that says, oh, you're so smart, right? Oh my gosh, you're brilliant. And pretty soon they begin to believe they are their brilliance. And so ironically, sometimes the people with the most natural gifts, this is true both intellectually and also in sports, music, and several other places, those that start with the most gifts get a little bit hamstrung by this fixed mindset. Even more important than that in the research, what she learned is it's a choice, right? I could have a fixed mindset about, speaking in public, for example. I could believe this is not something I have a talent for, so I'm never going to try it, right? But if I'm willing to if I decide that's a fixed mindset and it's not serving me very well, now I can actually take a risk, get out, hope I won't fail, but if I do, it won't be the end of the world, and I'm going to give it a try, right? Who knows what can come from this? So to me, it's a very important distinction, because some further work on this area was done by Eve Grodnitsky, who is also a Vistage speaker in the U.S. In fact, she was the Speaker of the Year, another PhD in social psychology. And what she posits is that most of us actually have some kind of a spectrum of fixed mindset and growth mindset. So for example, in certain areas, I have a big growth mindset. I'm eager to learn. I don't care if I fail. If I don't get it right the first time, I'm going to get it again. I'm determined to learn it. And maybe I won't ever become an expert, but at least I'm going to be better than I am today, right? That's my growth mindset. But there are other areas or situations that trigger me right into that fixed mindset space. And lots of times for myself, when change happens, it's kind of out of control, right? I don't have any say in it, and all of a sudden, like, my cheese is moved, and what once was, what isn't. That's something for me that triggers me right over here into that fixed mindset. And so what I have learned from this work is when I find myself there, I can make a choice. I can make a choice to leave that mindset behind and adopt a more growth mindset, right? Adopt a spirit of adaptability that can help me not only accept whatever changes have just happened, but maybe find a way to prosper and thrive inside of those. So this is another area where I would invite you to think about what's happening in your world. Where might you have a fixed mindset? What triggers you into that fixed mindset? And how can you be aware of it so when you find yourself there, you can make the shift back over to growth? A second tool for adaptability in a VUCA environment, a fast-changing environment, is this idea of the OODA loop. You may be familiar with this. It also comes from the military, from fighter pilots. And so what the theory of this is instead of a team going away for 3 months, creating some kind of a strategic plan that's outdated by the time it even happens, right? And then forcibly go that. What the OODA loop mindset or methodology says, just make small moves and then adapt. So the first step is just to orientate. Where am I, right? What is reality today? This is back to this concept of understanding. And then the second step, oops, sorry about that. Second step is to observe. What do I see? What's here? Third step, decide. Fourth step, act. Right? So now we've taken an action, things will change. We come back to the top of the loop, orient. Right? Over and over. Small changes in that small OODA loop. And what this kind of methodology will do for us is preserve options. Keep options open. And in a VUCA world, optionality is an asset, right? In a traditional planning cycle, we might say go for 3 months, or you can preserve open options and alternative paths or contingency, right? The more likely your chances are of success. And actually in valuations now, many experts will look at what kind of optionality is present for the company as part of the way that they, if you have optionality and contingency preserved, this is a way to increase in the value or an asset on the balance sheet. So again, we have some member stories. Chris Graham is the CEO and sole owner of the Private Client Law Group. He founded it. It's a boutique law firm that's focused on very high net worth individuals and family offices. His background is, his background is first in accounting and then in law. Tax and asset protection is the main focus. Chris comes from a difficult upbringing. His parents were poor, and so his background is one of poverty. And he has a dream of creating wealth for himself and his family and his extended family. This is his dream. A lawyer can make a lot of money, but at least in the United States, maybe not create a lot of wealth. And so Chris has adapted from only being an attorney with a law firm to becoming a family office advisor, which opens up his repertoire, creating more opportunities to him. And then he's also, our group has really guided him in that, because he is a brilliant man and an unbelievable strategic thinker. And so he started, through his connections, he knows a lot of businesses, and he's begun to make investments in these businesses, take an equity stake, be part of the strategic board of advisors. So he's morphing himself from attorney with a firm to actually investment banker or merchant banker with a stake in many different companies and a profound knowledge in the family office world. So this adaptability is really taking him on his goal. It's quite fun to see this progression, I would say. And another member, CT Darnell Construction. They started, his father, it's a family business. The father started the business. My member's name is Travis Darnell. His father started the business, and they sold racking systems to Home Depot. So Home Depot is based in Atlanta, and there's a number of customers that have, grown up around Home Depot as their suppliers. When Travis and his brother took over the company, that was really their only business. So they were very, very dependent, not just on that one line of business, but also on Home Depot, which is a risky place to be. And he joined our group in about 2008, 2009, and the bottom had fallen out of the business completely. He did a really good job once the economy turned around, of diversifying the interests of the business, not just Home Depot. They're in several other places now. Plus they have 2 lines of construction, one all related to, first related to racks. So lumber yards use racks, so they have their knowledge of racking systems, but now they might build the whole building to house the lumber. And then they went from that to general construction. They have a specialty in buildings that get repeated over and over and over through a bunch of different states because of the work in the lumber business, they were licensed for constructions all across the state. So he's created optionality for himself. At the same time, he's shown adaptability in the family relationships. So his brother, who's the 50% owner now, both of them are 50% owners, his brother is a great salesperson, a great sales hunter, and a terrible manager. And for years, Travis held on to the hope that this would change and his brother would actually help him co-lead the company. And there was finally an acceptance, and again, the Vistage group helped him with this, to say, this is not creating happiness for anybody. Let's have some clarity on roles, right? And let's redefine employee roles and owner roles, right? Especially for Clint, the brother, but also for several of the other family members that were in the company. So through that way, Travis has created a company that's really poised for the future in several different ways, right? So this brings us to our final element of teaching. So we've talked about vision, we've talked about understanding, we've talked about courage and adaptability. And now this, to me, the thing that brings this all together is teaching. Vistage has done some research in where CEOs plan to invest over the next year. And leadership development is only a little tiny 5%. My belief in a Vistage world is probably the single most important thing that a leader or CEO can do is to develop other leaders, right? Develop the people around them and bring up their leadership skills. So instead of being the sole captain, right, of the ship, there's actually a well-defined team. And as the business grows, that development needs to be pushed further. This way, you as a leader are taking advantage of the full human capital that's available to me. And I think you saw, as we went through the clips, both Nelson Mandela and Francois Pienaar, and there's more in the movie, of not only leading but also teaching, right? Teaching these VUCA leadership characteristics. And so I invite you, as you think about your VUCA challenge in your VUCA world, who can you teach? Who can you bring up, right? And raise their capabilities up so that you're not all by yourself, alone in your organization. I'm going to close with a final clip from the movie. You all know what happens, but the moment of celebration is so passionate, And actually, this clip is not from the movie. It's actually the actual celebration after the Springboks won the World Cup. So, well, I forgot about David Gracie. Sorry about that. Let me go back for my closing and just briefly talk about my friend David Gracie again, one of my founding members. David has done such a great job of coaching his team. I mentioned this earlier. This is a pretty small company. I mean, they were like 10 employees, and now they're about 25 or 30 employees, and they'll probably grow to be 50 employees. But with that, in that scale, he has 4 team leaders, and all 4 of them are in Vistage groups. All right, he's investing heavily in developing the team around them, and part of the reason they work together so well and in such great alignment is this investment in leaders. And the salesman that I mentioned earlier, the sales leader, had a lot of leadership experience before, but the rest of them are engineers. They're network engineers, and they're growing to be actual leaders. And it's really fun to see that happen. And the investment that David works in that is one of the things that's going to make it possible for him to succeed. Okay. Now, we'll go to the end of the closing. I'm seeing if we can just start the video and celebrate. We can just celebrate with the South Africans in this moment.
Back it comes to use Van der Westhuizen. Little knock forward, but that's it. South Africa have won the World Cup, having been back in international rugby for less than 3 years and having not taken part in the first 2 competitions. At their first attempt, they have stolen the crown. Unbelievable scenes all around the park. Francois Pina, as you can see, absolutely in tears. Pina, who had a lot of criticism as captain on the field, they all knew he had what it took off the field, a tremendous ambassador. He's proved it on the field now. And the whole of South Africa behind him. A momentous occasion. And just looking even at the flags and the supporters there, I can't tell you how much this place has changed in the last 3 years. When we came to see the first match back after isolation, it was all the old South African flag. There still wasn't a black face to be seen. But now it really is this rainbow nation, all behind their team. Kitch Christie, the coach, who's also been criticised a tremendous amount for his selections. Everything's worked. Casey Pienaar with him, his assistant. Chester Williams there congratulating Brendan Pinter on getting onto the field. Incredible scenes. The president to the captain. There it is.
I love that moment. So, vision, understanding, courage, adaptability, and teaching. All of these together can make it possible not just to survive, but to prosper and thrive and win in the VUCA world. Thank you very much. Questions? No? I think maybe maybe it's just enough. We can go forth in the moment, but I'm happy to take any questions anybody wants to ask.
No, quería ver un poco
I
este
just
tema,
wanted, to
sin meterme en la política
see this
profunda.
issue,
Creo que
but
se
without
vive
going
un
into
paralelo
deep
en
politics.
Estados Unidos y en
I think there's a
Argentina,
parallel in
donde
the
todo esto
United States, in
lamentablemente
Argentina,
no lo ven los líderes de
where
arriba.
leaders don't see all of this. Maybe we in companies,
un poquito mejor o
we
un
can
poquito peor,
do
pero
it better, do it
quería ver
worse.
su visión
Then I
un poco
wanted
de
to know
cómo
your vision
en Estados
or
Unidos o
your
en
view, your
Argentina, cada uno
perspective,
con
both
sus
in the States and in
particularidades,
Argentina,
todo esto que logró
all
Mandela
of this that
en
Mandela
Sudáfrica, que usted
accomplished
contó que
in South
fue mucho más
Africa, that
difícil.
you
Parecería que hay
us,
como una vuelta
it
atrás,
looks like it's going
como que hay como una
backwards,
vuelta
it's going one step behind.
acá lo llaman la grieta, no sé
We
cómo,
call it
cómo lo
like
traducen
a
en
crack
inglés o cómo
here,
se dice, pero esa
like
grieta
a
como se
gap.
achica en
But how
Estados
can
Unidos,
we
en Argentina, en los
solve
países
and make that
Venezuela,
crack smaller?
y la otra reflexión es
Argentina,
que
Venezuela,
yo
other
estoy diciendo en mi
countries.
trabajo,
And the other thought or
que digo,
reflection that I'm
Trump
telling in
y
my
el líder coreano
country.
apretan un botón
Trump and the
y
Korean
no
leader
sabemos ni
push
qué
a
hacer dentro de un
button,
mes.
and I don't know what's going to happen a month
Un poco
from
es
now.
una
So
pregunta
this is
general,
a
¿no?
general
¿Cómo se puede
overall
trabajar contra
question.
eso,
How can
digamos?
we work
Si es que se puede.
facing that, if this is possible?
So I really appreciate that question, because of course I imagine it's on the minds of many people. And I wish I had the answer. Then I would be the king of the world, the queen of the world. Right? So, but I do have maybe some perspective. So first of all, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and which is in the southern part of the United States. And so we had a period of Jim Crow laws, right? Situation sort of similar to the apartheid. I'm old enough that I remember the later days of that. So when I was a child, things like black people or African Americans sitting on the back of the bus and having several water fountains was very much a part of our reality. And luckily, I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. I live now in Atlanta. In those two cities were really strong leadership. Of course, Martin Luther King was based in Atlanta, right? Another great visionary leader who put forward a movement, a change movement. But there was also this in the city of Atlanta, the mayor of Atlanta, the white mayor of Atlanta was also a very strong leader who recognized that change was coming. There were some others, even in the clergy, some leaders in the clergy who could see this coming. And in my hometown as Knoxville, the same kind of leadership happened. And interestingly, in both of those places, the white leaders, right, the traditional leaders, were able to work with the business community. Right, they came to the business community and said, these times are changing, and it's the business community who is usually in front of this kind of, right, as a lead in this kind of thing, not far behind. So in those cities where there was that strong leadership, we did not have the kind of riots and destruction that happened in some of the other cities during the 50s and the 60s time. So now fast forward to now, right, 50, 60 years later, sometimes it does feel like we're going backwards, right? I would posit that we've had that kind of forward, backward all along. And my choice on this, what I've come to learn is, especially in this particular issue in the US, right, it's 60 years later, we could look at it today and say, oh my gosh, there's still elements of racism, and sometimes it seems like it's growing as it is today. But if we look back to where we were 60 years ago, we're light years ahead of that. And my belief is, I have a belief in the good-heartedness of people. So my personal belief is, even though sometimes we may have setbacks in certain areas, and again, I support our president. He was duly elected, and he is our president. Some of the things he does I agree with, some I don't. But what I do believe is that the overall course of history is to the positive, and that deeply held divides like these that we're talking about today take time to change. So my feeling is I choose to be an optimist. Right, and I choose to work in the business environment and in some of my, community and nonprofit activities to further the cause of reconciliation. I hope that's helpful.
Linda here.
Yes.
Hola, hola. Sí, voy a hablar español. No sé.
I'm going to speak in
Lo
Spanish.
que pasa es que con Linda hicimos un
But,
seminario
with Linda, we had a
durante estos días
seminar
y
during the
ella
past
sabe quién
3
soy.
days, and she knows who I am.
Como chair,
As a chair,
cuando ibas explicando
well,
toda
you
esta
explained
exposición, yo iba reconociendo
this presentation. I
la
was like
situación de varios
recognizing
miembros.
the situation of
De hecho,
different of
aquí
my
hay dos
different
de ellos
members.
que
Several
están
members.
trabajando
There are
en el
2 of
desarrollo
them
del liderazgo
working
de su
in
gente,
leadership
están
development of
tratando
their
de
people
construir una visión
and
del
trying to
futuro.
build a future vision.
Y aquí va la pregunta. Lo que
And
encuentro
what I
es
find is
que una enorme
a
dificultad
huge difficulty
para sacar
to
del confort
take them out of the
varios de los
comfort
miembros
zone of several
que no
members
ven
who can't
el
see
cambio del
the
medio
change
ambiente,
of the environment,
que están muy cómodos ganando buen
who are
dinero.
very comfortable making money,
¿Cómo hago para crear esa conciencia
and
de que
how I
es
can
necesario
create
moverse?
that awareness that moving is necessary?
Yeah, I think one of the things, one challenge in the world is we can't change anybody else, right? We can change ourselves, and we can hope to coach others. So I think one thing that I would think about relative to that is many times when someone wants something, right? If I want something, then what I'm going to invest has to match, right? If I want something, but I'm not willing to risk, then that's not going to work. There has to be an equal alignment, right, between what I want. So if what I want is a lot different than what I have today, then my level of investment, both in terms of time and treasure resources, but also my investment in growing myself, which means getting out of the comfort zone, has to be aligned with that. And when it's not, sometimes what I find, especially in coaching, is it's the belief system. It's the belief system that holds people back. So if I have a belief that says my value, my self-worth, and the things that make me beloved by other people as a human being all have to do with my success, that's my belief system, then trying to do something that could fail or could make me look less successful is very, very difficult, right? And lots of times when those belief systems get formed, especially ones like that, I have to succeed, I have to be right, I have to be smart. Lots of times when those belief systems are formed, they're positive, they're empowering, they serve, right, the holder of the belief very well. But when circumstances change, the map changes, and now that belief system may not be serving them so well. And so what I find for people in like a coaching environment is if I can help them understand and uncover the belief system and then really look at, is it really true? If I take a step and try something new and I fail, does that actually mean that I'm no longer valuable as a human being? Does it actually mean, right, that my family's going to starve to death? Right? I'll end up cast in the wilderness. That's where it goes. But that's not true. That belief system for most people, most leaders, isn't really true. And so if I can go to the belief system and there's an acknowledgement that maybe that's not true, then sometimes movement can flow from that. I hope that's helpful.
Failure and losses are part of life and businesses, and sometimes organizations tend to minimize failures or make them into a torture and a punishment to everyone. From the leader's position, which is your recommendation on how to make the organization digest a failure or a loss, like closing a business unit or firing people?
Yes, this is, I think, Elon Musk, who's doing the SpaceX. I don't know if anybody follows his tweet, but like the first time they blew up a spaceship, which of course was millions, if not billions of dollars, his tweet was, well, we won't make that same mistake the next time, right? We're going to learn from, we're just going to learn from that mistake, right? And the second time it happened, they put down in the ocean instead of on the platform. He said something like, well, we got closer this time, right? So I'm using a little bit of humor, but what I mean is it's the attitude of the leader that really matters. If the leader becomes punitive around failure, then the rest of the organization is going to become punitive around failure. But if the leader can accept, now we have failures of values, right? We have failures when we put somebody in a role and they're not able to keep up with that role, and we have to make an adjustment there. These kind of things happen, just as you said. But if my attitude around failure, first of all, if my attitude around my leadership is my job is to help the people that are working with me become better leaders and to help them be successful, that's my role. And when they fail, I'm going to get side by side, right, to try to figure out what we can learn from the failure and go forward in the future. Then I think we start to create a culture where risk-taking, right, the proper kind of risk-taking can happen.
¿Qué tal? Buen día.
Good morning.
Mi nombre es Sebastián.
I'm Sebastián. And
bueno, sinceramente me gusta mucho.
Honestly, I liked your presentation very much, but there is a word that is turning my head, and it's a relationship with our environmental and corporate relationship with what we receive as businessmen, and it's exponential growth.
Yo creo antes que nada
I
que gran
believe
parte de los problemas que hay
that a
tanto
big
en la
part
sociedad como
of
en
the
las empresas somos grandes
problems in
responsables
companies and
hoy en
in
día más que nada de lo
society
que
in
es la
general,
inflación
we are
en
responsible
Argentina.
of
Como empresarios
inflation
somos
in
muy
Argentina
responsables.
as businessmen.
Entonces,
So,
si
if
todo el tiempo nos están mostrando
we
como ejemplo el crecimiento
there's an example
exponenciales,
of
en ningún
exponential
momento nos
growth all
planteamos
the
lo que
time,
es
but
un
we
crecimiento
never
moderado
think what a
para poder
moderate
frenar
growth is to
toda esta
stop
ansiedad
all
y todo
this
este mundo que se nos viene.
anxiety, this world that is
¿Por qué todo el tiempo está
overwhelming
hablando de
us?
crecimiento
Why are
exponencial
people
y
all the
no
time talking about
sentarnos a pensar
exponential
en lo que
growth
estamos haciendo
rather
para
than
poder hacer las cosas
thinking
bien
what we are
y
doing
que
to
ese
do
mismo
things right,
ese mismo resultado de
and
hacer
that
las
same
cosas bien
outcome of
es lo
doing
que va a
things
generar
right
por ahí un
will
mundo mejor
generate a better world
y no
and
mirar
not
solamente lo
look
nuestro, ¿no?
only our side.
Entonces por ahí mi pregunta viene
So my question is,
o más que una pregunta es qué
rather
opinión
than a
tiene
question, is what do
en
you
base a lo
think
que es un crecimiento
based on an exponential
con lo que es la
growth
responsabilidad
with the
social y el mismo
social
consumo de
responsibility
recursos
and the
naturales que le
consumption
estamos
of
haciendo a este mundo que
natural
es
resources that
insostenible.
we are doing to this world
¿Cómo relacionamos?
that
¿De qué nos
is
sirve
no
crecer
longer
exponencialmente si
sustainable?
estamos hablando de
What's the
ser mejores
use of
personas y
growing
eso no nos
exponentially
lleva a
if
un
when
mejor
we are
lugar?
talking about becoming better people?
Y es muy difícil
And it's
transmitirlo
very difficult to
mantenerlo día a
convey
día porque
this
caigo en
on a
los mismos
daily
errores
basis
que
because we fall
caemos
on the
todos,
same
¿no?
mistakes
Si en una
over and
sala
over
como
again.
esta
But
no
if in a
reconocemos
room
una
like
cuestión
this we
así,
don't recognize
el
something
mundo
like
es la
this,
grieta
the
y es el
world
abismo
is the crack and the abyss itself.
y con una buena vida y
And
todos
with a
vamos
good
pero
life,
es a eso donde vamos.
we're
Hagamos algo.
gonna be better. Let's do something for it or about it.
Yeah, so I agree that in our world we have lots of opportunities, right? There's lots of opportunities for us to be better, and we also in my personal belief, have an obligation towards stewardship. Stewardship for me is a very important word. It has to do with caretaking of assets, and certainly our natural resources are an asset, right? That we hold to. We really are the stewards of those for future generations. And so I think in my mind, this comes back to the visionary piece of leadership. And what I was talking about earlier in terms of sort of the enforcer. Because exponential growth sometimes is the right choice for a company and a business, and it creates value, and it's absolutely the way to go. And sometimes a slower growth rate can also be appropriate and consistent with what the values are for that company, and with this legal and moral and ethical imperatives. And it's the enforcer that holds that box, right? That says, this is how we're going to play. And I think what you can see is I think this is true of businesses, it's true of human beings, it's true of all kinds of organizations, including businesses, and it's true at the national and international level. When things get off track, it's sometimes because the leader has let go of that enforcer role, right? And we get outside of both the values of the company and some of the legal and ethical imperatives there. So my belief is that this is very important in the role of the leader. I hope that comes something to an answer.
Hola. Hola. Linda, estamos transmitiendo por
we are broadcasting by streaming, and there's a question that says that your presentation, how is it related with the ontological coaching?
How do you relate your presentation and all what that you present with the coach, ontological?
With coaching?
Coach.
With coaching?
With the coaching.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, as a coach, I want to model, the same leadership imperatives that I offer here, right? So I'm a big believer in leadership by example. In our Vistage environment, we do coaching, of course, one-to-one. The Vistage members know this, and we also lead our group of peers. And so the leadership imperatives that we talk about here, in my mind, are very important for the coach to also model. I'm not sure if I'm getting to the meat of that question, but okay. I hope I am.
I hope so. Bueno. Si no hay más preguntas,
so if there are no further questions, I would like to especially thank Linda because we had there was another speaker who should have come, Alan Hogg, but for force majeure reasons he was not able to make it, and Linda took the challenge and the turbulence and change, and she made a great presentation. I would also like to thank the team in Vistage, Lorena, Jessica, Florencia, everyone who worked so hard these days to have this presentation here, and also thank Maria Alegre for the slide. Thank you.
Yes, I would reiterate that we had a big effort to make all this happen. The support and help by Vistage here in Argentina, also in San Diego, was just huge, and I have really appreciated my time in this beautiful country and the gracious welcome from the people here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope to be able to visit again.